What is the main means by which autotrophic organisms obtain energy?
Yeah, so this is a great question. I'm actually teaching some of this in my class right now. And as I usually like to do, I guess I'd sort of like to talk a little bit about what the question is really asking, think about some of the words. So the word that's probably going to trip people up in there is autotroph or autotrophic. And we can kind of break that down. Trophic is maybe not a piece of a word we hear very often, but auto refers to self. Auto means self. We tend to think of it as automatic, right? We hear that word, and what that essentially means is a machine that works by itself. But in the case of an autotroph, what we're talking about, the troph part of that word refers to feeding. And so the notion is that autotrophs, the name implies that they're able to feed themselves essentially automatically. They don't have to go out looking for food. So we humans, maybe the way I describe that, it sounds like a human. Of course I can feed myself. I can go to King Soopers and get food and sustain myself here in this modern world. But that doesn't make me an autotroph. I'm a heterotroph because I have to take food from outside of myself and put it into my body. These autotrophs are making their food in-house, I guess I should say. And the typical autotroph that we're talking about is a plant. So if we could jump to my screen really quick. This is just a really simple little animated GIF that shows a plant leaf, right? And we can see sunlight is hitting the leaf, and the leaf is breathing in carbon dioxide, and there's also water flowing into the leaf from the stem via the roots. And that ultimately what's being produced here is carbohydrates and oxygen. Plants, or I guess green algae, but this process is sort of the original autotrophic process on the earth. And we can look at this another way. I'll just put it up as a chemical reaction. But what plants do, as I said, was they take carbon dioxide from the air, water from the ground, and they use the energy from the sun. You can see in this chemical reaction diagram, chlorophyll is noted down here. It's the chlorophyll inside of plant cells that's excited, that allows us to use the sun's energy, or that allows plants to use the sun's energy to combine carbon dioxide and water. And what you end up with as a byproduct is sugar. This is the formula for glucose and oxygen. And so this is really great for a number of reasons. So when we think about life evolving and life establishing itself on the earth, we would think about the idea that the first creatures that had to have existed would have to have been autotrophs, because they would have had to have some way to produce the food that they're eating. Heterotrophs we can only subsist thanks to autotrophs. All of the food that we eat as humans ultimately comes from autotrophs. Even if you're eating, let's say, meat of some kind, maybe you're eating beef, which comes from a cow. The meat on the cow had to come from a plant, from the grass that it ate, and the sugar inside of that grass, the chemical energy inside of that grass, comes from the stored energy that grass stored when it used the sun's energy to combine carbon dioxide and water, again, into sugar. And then the other really fantastic piece here is that because oxygen is produced through the process of photosynthesis, oxygen is required by heterotrophs, by most animals, to burn sugar as we live. So when I eat, I don't know, something like a cookie, let's say, and the molecules of the cookie are broken down into sugar that my body can actually use. The other piece of that puzzle for me being able to use it is I need oxygen to burn the sugar, to break it down. And what heterotrophs do is they combine, they run this reaction backwards. Heterotrophs eat sugars and they use oxygen that they've breathed to breathe out carbon dioxide, and then they also get water as a byproduct of that. And so this relationship between photosynthesizing autotrophs and heterotrophs is this key relationship. And again, heterotrophs could only exist thanks to autotrophs. I mentioned earlier that chlorophyll was what makes this possible inside of plants, and I just thought I'd briefly mention, when we look at plant cells contain a special organelle called a chloroplast. Animal cells don't have this. Animal cells have mitochondria, which plant cells have too, you can see over here. Mitochondria is the organelle that's going to allow any organism to burn sugar for energy, but it's only the plant cells that have the chloroplasts. And up close, this is just a diagram, but this is something like what a chloroplast would look like, but there's this chemical chlorophyll that's inside of the thylakoids listed here, these little pancake-looking stacks of green things. And it's the energy of the sun can literally excite the molecules of the chlorophyll to a point that allows the plant to use that energy to do their photosynthesizing process. Just as a final note here, I'll also mention that there's a special class of critters out there called chemoautotrophs. Now they're rare, but we would think of plants as being photoautotrophs, and most autotrophs in the world are photoautotrophs. They use the light from the sun to do this photosynthesizing. But there are rare instances of chemoautotrophs that do not need to be exposed to sunlight. These kinds of things might live, let's say, like deep underground in a cave. And these types of organisms can actually make their own food in-house using energy from chemicals that well up in the ground that they're exposed to. For example, I worked in a cave many years ago where there were chemoautotrophs being studied that subsisted off of hydrogen sulfide gas that was creeping up through cracks in the rock. So just to throw out there that there are other kinds of autotrophs, but most autotrophs are, and the question asked about the most common type, most are photosynthesizing autotrophs. So, felt like a little bit of a whirlwind answer there, but there you go.